This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 78 of the Healthy Critters Radio on the Horse Radio Network. Healthy Critters Radio is brought to you by Biostar US. Find them online at biostarus.com.
On today's show, we explore how music affects horses. The breed of the show is the pot-bellied pig. In Critter Nutrition, we address the question of wheat for horses. And in Coffee Clatch, we talk about reading the body language of our dogs. Listen in. My Patty P.
Tigarelli.
You've had snow.
We had ice.
Oh, you did?
Well,
You didn't
okay.
have snow?
Yeah. Well, okay. It was ice. It was a little bit of snow. It was a little bit of ice. Actually, I have to say, as much as ice stinks, and it really does stink, it is so beautiful. Like yesterday, I tried to get a picture so I could send it to you to make you feel a little bit bad because you did say move back to Virginia, which I did. And then you left. But the ice was on the trees, and it was like the sun was
so
shining through it. It was
beautiful. It's like fairyland.
it was glorious. It truly was glorious. But yeah, we had, and it's funny because I've chosen to be living in the middle of nowhere. I was really worried. I was supposed to go to Dallas and do a clinic, and I was getting in at like 12, and I would have had to have driven back. Actually, in retrospect, most likely they probably would have canceled the flight or done something. But I just kept thinking, I'm not doing that. So I changed my weekend, because of the snow, and now it's supposed to snow Sunday again. So somehow, Tiggs, this is your fault. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's 70 degrees and a little cool today. I had to wear a little bit of Patagonia.
I just drew a picture of you. I just drew a picture of you, and I was poking you a little bit there. Yeah.
But I wanted to tell you that I was at the dog park yesterday, and this woman brought in these two French bulldogs, and one of them could only go maybe 3 steps before it was.
Yeah.
And I tell
That's
you,
good.
I felt, thank you. I felt so bad for that little dude.
Oh, but Tigger, mine will do that when they get, more excited. It has a lot to do with the structure of their face and whatever. And they're, someone had once asked me, are they similar to pugs? And I said, no, they're kind of worse, I think, just in my experience. Not that I've been around that many pugs, but they're just so stinking happy. I mean, yeah, they may make a lot of noise. They may fart a lot. They may throw up a lot of water after they drink it, but they're just really happy little dogs.
It got me so worried about
how hot they got.
Dog's breathing. And, all the other dogs are running around. This is the medium dog park. They really probably should have been in the small, but
they probably weigh 30 pounds.
They were little muscle men. But it really struck me. I mean, his mouth was open, and he hadn't done anything.
Maybe they're not very fit. I mean, not that mine are that fit, but they are very predisposed to breathing like that. And if they get excited, actually, I mean, mine are pretty fit because my son takes them out in our 200 acres and runs around. But it's a good point because it's such a different type of breed, really, than you've ever had. Obviously.
Oh yeah.
And before I ever had them, for sure. But you become hyper aware of what the weather's like. Is it too cold? Is it too hot? I mean, being in Houston, I did get them relatively acclimated to the weather. Not that they could stay outside in 100 degrees, for sure. But they would go to the barn with me, and we had a little dog area. And they were, they were good till about 10 o'clock, which is saying a lot because, trust me, when you're in Texas, 10 o'clock is kind of a turning point. Due hotness. But I think that it's interesting because you just made me think of all these other things. I always tried to make sure my dogs were fit for the weather.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And that is the first time I ever have had to think about that in a breed. Like, I'm going to bring my dog to the barn. They have to be fit to be outside. Does that make sense? You have to be very conscious of how they are because of their breathing.
Yeah. And it really brought that home to me. I thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah, you don't have to think about that. It
freaked me out. I thought, is there something wrong with this dog?
Well, it sounds like maybe they weren't very fit at all, which is, again, I mean, it's such a designer breed at the moment where everybody is, I mean, it's becoming very, very, very popular because they're darling dogs, but you've got to be careful. You can't put them in situations where they're going to get too hot or too cold. My one Angus, it's almost like he has the weather app on his phone, which I didn't know he had either, because he's like, I'm not going outside. Like he sits in the hallway, and looks outside, and he's seen snow twice now because he was in Houston before we moved here. And he's like, I'm not going out and that stuff. So I'm just going to urinate in the house. No, he doesn't, but I'm just saying, he's like, I would prefer to do this in here if we can make that arrangement, and then once I get him out, he's fine. But the other one will go right out. The other one is a little bit smaller and he's just out and he's kind of scrappy and he doesn't care. But yeah, they're definitely a different type of critter.
Yes. And it's so funny to watch the other dogs, running, playing, they're barely panting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so loud.
How big was it? How big was this guy?
He was pretty big.
Okay. Because I find the bigger they are, I think they pant more. That's just my experience. I don't know if that's an actual thing. Because
he had a very roachy back.
Mm-hmm, that's very common.
So anyway, it just really struck me because at the dog park, you do get to see lots of different kinds of dogs.
Yeah.
Rescue dogs and purebreds. And it's really quite a delight because you get to meet lots of different kinds of dogs.
Yeah.
This was my first being that close to a Frenchie. I've seen Frenchies from a distance, but I thought that is one sound I could not deal with.
Well,
it freaked me out. Like, do I need to rush you to the vet?
No, I totally understand that. I mean, because the first couple times that happened with me when they got a little bit older, I was like, "Holy crap!" But it's a different. And let's face it, I've had many different breeds.
Yes, you have.
From rescues to purebred, but there's been I'm going to say a learning curve, not in a hard way, but just, there's just been things like you really have to adjust. And, I did tell you, one of the main reasons that I wanted to have an Aussie was when I was traveling from Houston to San Antonio to do clinics, I had both of my little Frenchies with me and I was like, oh, I'm just going to go to the bathroom and whatever. And it was in June and it was 98 degrees and I could not keep the windows down and turn my vehicle off because it would have been a dangerous situation for them. And that was the last time I took them on a road trip like that because I was just like, if I'm going to stop, I've got to be able to keep my vehicle going. Well, I was going to keep my vehicle going if someone was going to come in and take my dog. So it's just different. I mean, it's a different mindset.
You're going to laugh because when this dog started to hyperventilate, I went over to the owner and I said, is he okay?
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Oh no! And what did they?
She said, "Oh, that's just him."
You?
Huh?
Don't tell us you got kicked out of the dog park.
No, because it was the dog's owner, and she said, "Oh no, he always does that." So I said, "Okay." Anyway,
that's so funny.
We know how weather affects Frenchies, but did you know that music affects horses?
I heard that's a thing.
It's a thing. So we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how music affects horses, and it clearly affects humans and dogs, so I guess it should be no surprise. So let's get on with it.
All righty.
So our roundtable discussion today is how music affects horses. Have you guys noticed anything in particular with when music's playing in the barn and how the horses react, or if you're in the ring and somebody turns on a radio?
I think I've noticed more riding. It was funny when we decided to have this as a discussion. I started thinking about times in the past where just people made sure there was music in the barn and whatnot. But for me, I mean, I had someone that always would make sure that they had the radio on at night which, or, with music or whatever, which I always thought was kind of cool. But I've certainly noticed a difference riding. Obviously, I love to ride freestyles, and I just know that has been always such a big connection. And I definitely notice, a horse that gets into certain types of music. Like I've definitely felt that.
Jennifer?
We always, when I was working for other people, it was always this big argument in the barn over what kind of music was allowed to be playing in the barn because, somebody somewhere decided that horses must not like rock and roll, and I suspect that happened in the 50s. You had to play either had to play public radio or you had to play some easy listening music. And I usually opted for silence over either one of those. And still opt for silence most of the time. But I definitely enjoy listening to music when I'm schooling in an arena. I find that that background rhythm going in my head helps me focus on the rhythm on the horse. Even if it's not the same rhythm, I can be listening to a waltz while I'm trotting. But somehow or another, it tends to ground me a little bit more because when I'm riding in an arena, I tend to overthink everything. I get inside my own head. And it helps. But for general in the barn atmosphere, I frankly prefer quiet myself. And I think that horses do react to the kind of music, but I think they're reacting to the humans who are reacting to the music, to tell you the truth.
That's a good point, because I definitely would agree with that.
Well,
so
interestingly enough, I found 2 studies on music's effect on horses. So the first study was, I think, like 2010, and it was done in England. And so they looked at the effects of different kinds of music on stabled horses. And they studied 8 thoroughbred geldings that had been stabled for 3 hours. They played 4 different kinds of music. They played classical, Beethoven, country, Hank Williams, rock, Green Day, and jazz, New Stories, for 30 minutes each. The researchers recorded detailed behavior observations according to an equine ethogram, a catalog of all behaviors or actions exhibited by horses. They also observed the horse's behavior for 30 minutes without music. The pair determined that horses showed the same balance of restful and alert behaviors during classical and country music as they did when there was no music at all. But the difference between these kinds of music and silence was that with country, on average, the horses tended to eat more quietly, a natural behavior that reflects calmness and good welfare, than they did with silence. On the other hand, jazz and rock music caused horses to display more frequent stressful behaviors as compared to silence, indicated by stamping, head tossing, snorting, vocalizing. They did not observe any of these behaviors in the horses when classical or country music was played or when there was no music. Carter also noted that while the horses still ate when listening to jazz or rock, they did so nervously, snatching at food in short bursts. Jazz seemed to be the most aversive genre of all, and this might be due to the fast tempo and the minor key. The researchers recommended playing music at a volume only 21 decibels when in the barn. So I thought, well, that is pretty interesting. And then I found this really interesting study in Poland from 2016. They tested 73-year-old Arabian horses in their first 3-year-olds.
Oh, 7-3. I thought you said, okay.
70 horses that are 3 years old.
Okay, gotcha.
That are Arabian horses. In their first race season, were divided into an experimental group of 40 horses and a control group of 30 horses and placed in separate barns. The experimental group was subject to music, guitar music performed in a new age genre, played in the barn for 5 hours in the afternoon during the study, which lasted for 3 years. The control group had no music playing in the barn. The emotional state of the horses was assessed at rest, saddling, and warm-up walk under the rider by measuring cardiac activity and heart rate. Measurements were taken 6 times every 30 to 35 days. The music effect on the emotional state was also considered with regard to the horse's performance. The music positively affected the emotional state in racehorses. The influence was noticeable after the first month of playing music and increased in the second and third months. A positive effect of the music on prizes won by the horses in the experimental group compared to the control group was also found. The results suggest that music played in barns can improve the welfare and performance of racehorses.
So that begs the question, did both barns have the same trainer and the same riders?
Well, I pulled up this study from Paul, the Pollock report, the
Pollock report, yep.
Racehorse, yep. And he gives a little bit more. Oh, this is a different one. Sorry.
Oh,
So
there's
here's
even
another
more.
study. Yeah.
Oh,
This
it's
is,
endless.
2017. 48 horses, half of which were trailered for about 20 minutes, and the other was given an appointment with a farrier. All horses were exposed to the stress-inducing situation under 3 sets of circumstances, with specially designed earphones that played music, with earplugs in that blocked sound, and with nothing in their ears. Horses were observed to have decreased stress levels when listening to classical music during transport. The music was also found to reduce the horse's heart rate after being stressed more quickly than when not listening to music or when sounds were blocked by earplugs.
Interesting. You know what? Horses need to listen to the Horse Radio Network. Can you
That's
imagine
what
the
it
reduction in
is.
stress? Can you just imagine?
Well,
Wow.
then
Brilliant.
we need to do some classical music so that when people have it in the barn, they're listening to Healthy Critters or they're listening to horse radio. There's a nice classical music playing in the background.
We
at
need to
low
add a little bit of that. I agree.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So I think what's really interesting to me is maybe before a big competition like 30 Days Out, you play classical music in the barn in the afternoon.
Which is so interesting because classical music makes me so nervous. It's never been my thing. And it's just so interesting how everybody has their thing. You know what I mean?
So they played in the Polish study New Age music. So that's a lot of guitars. It's a lighter,
right?
Guitar, harp, violin. Those would be higher range instruments.
Right. Yeah. Neat.
Like a violin concerto.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Isn't it amazing?
It's so amazing. So
I wonder if they make Bose headphones that fit horses.
Well, they certainly did in that other study.
We need to find out who made those and get them. Nigel's going to have to wear those suckers.
So if you've had some interesting experiences with horses and music, let us know on healthycrittersradio.com.
That's the place.
Hello?
Hattie.
Tickle?
Yes.
Patty?
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer?
I'm here. All accounted for.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I'm just rubbing my paws together in glee and enthusiasm.
Good to know.
Hedwig, we were all enjoying earlier, before we started to record tonight, we were all enjoying chatting a little bit about how we listen to music and podcasts and books through earphones nowadays and how that process of absorbing audio has changed over the years. So we've got curious. How is it that Hedwig prefers to absorb audio content? How do you like to listen to music or talk shows or podcasts? What do you prefer? What is your favorite?
When we're in the truck, we listen to a lot of NPR. And when we're in the barn, the phone is plugged into a radio using a special cord, magic cord it's called, and we live stream WAMC from home, so that even in Florida, we know that everyone at home is freezing to death. And so that even if we're, for example, today at the end of a 12-hour day, we feel better about our life choices. And let's think about other things we might do. We like to listen to music, but sometimes the servant does singing, and we don't like the singing because it's loud. So we prefer she not embark on singing. So that's a thing. But she does do it, especially when she's tired. I would not like ear pods or whatever in my ears. I would find that upsetting. The radio is sufficient for me.
What kind of music do you like?
Well, I'm a very cultured little dog, and so I like music of all types. I, for example, am a fan of much classical music, and I like the way that it makes my toes point, and I want to dance and dance and dance around. And then also I like, when I'm feeling a little rowdy, I like the rock music because it lets me get my hair all fluffed out in wild suit, and I like to do that for sure. And that's no problem. And I try to like opera because I know that I should. Sometimes it's a little loud for my ears, so maybe not so much.
Don't blame you.
It's a little much. I like the drama. Don't get me wrong. The stories are amazing, but I just am not 100% convinced about the very high soprano.
Yeah, I have trouble with the soprano parts. Me too. But give me a good tenor any day.
Yeah, for sure. And I like a lot of different things. I like string quartets quite a bit. That's very pleasing to my ears.
How about jazz?
I like piano jazz, not as much the saxophone. A little too squeaky. I don't like trumpets. I like big band music, though. That's very pleasing.
I don't suppose that you like folk like Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan.
Well, I do, of course, love the Leonard. And one time I was allowed to see Leonard even, and that was amazing. Here's a God. I love him so much. I know all the words to the Leonard Cohen songs.
Wow.
I'm not as much a fan of the Bob Dylan. He's sort of a whiner. It's like if our friend Jim could sing, only not really. And, the Indigo Girls, early work, very pleasing to me. Later on, they got a little boring, but I liked them early. Melissa Ferrick, she can rock out pretty well. I like her. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I have the image now. Hedwig gets her private jet and has special piped-in music that might sometimes be NPR, but will be Indigo Girls, Leonard Cohen, some rock, maybe Aerosmith.
Oh, AC/DC.
AC/DC.
Well, you've got the hair for it.
You're
Hedwig.
heavy, man.
Absolutely.
You're heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
for
Guns
sure.
N' Roses.
Guns
Oh
N'
my gosh.
Roses.
It's Hedwig the Headbanger.
Yeah,
There
I
we
can
go.
see it.
Exactamundo, 9-inch nails. Oh, and when I'm feeling quite frisky, I like the Tori Amos. She's excellent.
Tori Amos, of course. Well, thanks, Hedwig. That's quite a music education for us.
It really absolutely.
I like to serve. Really, I'm here to educate everyone, not just you.
Well, thank you, Hedwig.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And now it's time for the breed of the show.
So we are at the breed of show segment of the program, and we have, let's just say Tigger and her ideas wanted to know more about Vietnamese potbelly pigs. So what's interesting about this Tiggy is, in what I have found is that some are called Vietnamese, some are called dwarf. There's like a bunch of different names for this potbelly pig. So I'm going to just basically go on the Vietnamese branch that I kind of studied. But there's a lot of, if anybody who has these potbelly pigs is listening, I apologize, because it sounds like there's just so much to learn about these really incredibly wonderful pets, really. So in Vietnam, they were bred in Vietnam, and I guess they can find them throughout Vietnam. And they were initially bred to be brought for zoo animals, and they were brought to Canada, and originally bred to be zoo animals, which I found so interesting. So,
I mean, like a petting zoo animal?
No, like a zoo animal. And I guess they were just sort of like kind of like an add-on thing. When you walk through a zoo, you probably don't go to that many zoos, but
no,
right. But when you go to a zoo, they have a lot of extra, animals that are around, more commonly seen animals to, the average public. And I think that was sort of the thing, because they're smaller than the average pig. They're really cute. They have this cute little pot belly, but through this, they became more popular as a domestic pet. And 1986, the first potbelly pig was sold to the U.S., which would make sense why we started seeing more, interest in that around that time. So just sort of kind of like basic things about them, like, number one, they are, as far as their characteristics, they're similar to like having a dog. They're love praise. They actually very highly trainable. You can potty train them for the litter box or going outside. They like treats. They, all of those things. And most people that are interested in them are thinking about keeping them inside, which kind of fascinated me. Because I always thought, well, you can have a potbelly pig, you're going to keep them outside. Well, they actually do quite well inside, which is kind of interesting. I never even thought about them being an indoor animal, but because there's sort of several different sizes, that is not too unrealistic. So getting back to sort of like the basic knowledge about them, their lifespan is between 12 to 18 years. Sometimes they make it up to 20. Basic weight is anywhere from like 70 to 150 pounds, which could be like some dogs we know, right?
Yeah.
They are full grown by the time that they're 5. So as far as care, if you're going to keep them indoors, which I think a lot of listeners, if they were thinking, oh, I'd like to get a pig, I think they're adorable, I'm going to keep it inside, it's not that unusual. They're apparently very easily trained for litter boxes. They're also like dogs, where if you bring them outside and you reward them and give them a treat, they'll respond quite well to that. They do need some room to romp. So I wasn't really able to see, I think that they can actually walk on leashes. I just know that from my experience that I've seen them do that. But the biggest thing that I kept reading about them was to let them root, get in the dirt, not unfertilized.
Find those truffles.
That's right. But just kind of get them in there and let them kind of root around, because it's just basically their nature. But interestingly enough, which we won't be surprised by this, is that they get the nutrients from the ground. They're apparently commonly low in vitamin E and selenium. And so when you let them get in the ground, that sort of helps that. But it also helps constipation, which I found very interesting. So biggest thing is obviously diet, because they are voracious eaters. And I can't tell you how many places that I looked into this. They said, if your pig's not eating, bring it to the vet. Like if it misses a meal and doesn't want to eat, get it to the vet. But basically the basic diet of a pig is going to be a lot of veggies, some sort of fruits, but lower in sugar. You don't want to feed them high protein. You want to make sure that you don't have a lot of starchy vegetables. So like peppers, cucumbers, some carrots. But there are, just like horses, there are some formulated feeds that you can do as well, and then add some more.
Aren't they omnivores? I mean, don't they eat meat and anything?
Yes. So that's a very good point. So, but it's not, it's more like they'll eat fish, bugs, stuff like that if they're left out to the wild. I don't know. But having said that, they'll eat garbage. You know what I mean? They constantly want to eat. So I think that some of that comes from the rooting aspect, because they always want to be moving around, kind of like horses. Horses have to constantly eat and, for digestion. But there are formulated feeds that you can give in addition to adding some fruits that are low in sugar and the vegetables. So if you're going to keep them in the house, which is obviously a very doable thing, you want to give them a place where they can sleep, like a tent or a sleeping bag of some sort, so they can kind of get in and sort of nestle. So another really interesting point. So who knows the phrase, I sweat like a pig?
Me.
Right? Yeah, we all do. Well, what's interesting is pigs only sweat through their snout. They do not sweat like you would think they would sweat. So it's kind of a funny thing.
Like the dog only sweats.
So you have to be very careful. Their nose has to be wet. Yep, etc. So, the biggest thing that I got out of, trying to study this is that they are really terrific pets. They don't like to be picked up and cuddled like a dog or a cat, but they are very interactive. They're extraordinarily intelligent. They do need a little bit of romping room, which doesn't need to be a wide area, but they've got to get down and, get their snouts in the dirt. So they have to be physically active, but they like to be mentally stimulated. So I think that you can actually teach them some tricks and stuff. And there's so many places out there that you can find out more about, like how to train them and whatever. But the interesting thing is that, so let's say, Tigger, tomorrow you wanted to go out and get a pig. You'd probably just go do it, right?
Pretty much.
Right. But if you lived in like Wellington or, some type of another area, like where you would just think, like where you in a neighborhood or whatever, you've got to check the laws. So you've got to make sure that a pig is actually allowed in your area, and which would lead to why some people end up getting these animals and just want to love them for the rest of their lives and can't because they're not legally allowed to have them. So the number one thing that I want to say, so that we can prevent these sweet little things ending up in rescues, is make sure that the laws in your county or your town or whatever, that they will allow you to have a pig, and your neighbors won't go, my neighbor has a pig, I want it out of here. And that's kind of the big thing, is that a lot of people, they become so popular, but they get told they can't have them. So
good to know.
Yeah, good little critter to have, similar to a dog, a little bit different, and they're just kind of fascinating. So, and by the way, I don't sweat like a pig. I sweat all over.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
And now we're at critter nutrition, and I'm going to answer the question, is wheat a good food for horses? In 2012, a group of Dutch researchers from Utrecht University identified gluten sensitivity as a potential cause of equine inflammatory small bowel disease. Since that study was published, I've looked deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of one particular gluten food, which is wheat. It is found in virtually all of the commercial feeds in various forms, such as wheat middlings, wheat germ, and of course the wheat bran used for making mashes. The amber waves of grain from the song America the Beautiful is not the wheat of today. The wheat today is the product of 40 years of genetic research aimed at increasing yield per acre. Modern-day wheat stands 18 to 24 inches tall, but it also contains a unique protein, gelatin, that can cross the blood-brain barrier and bind to morphine receptors in the brain. The National Institutes of Health have labeled these polypeptides exorphins. Exorphins bind and stimulate morphine receptors in the brain, making them just as addictive as narcotic drugs. This may in part explain why wheat products increase appetites in humans and why in part wheat is so difficult to eliminate from the diet. There is a complex carbohydrate unique to modern-day wheat called amylopectin A. Some researchers have named it a supercarbohydrate because it has the ability to increase blood sugar faster than other carbohydrates. It is highly digestible, thus it's able to raise blood sugar faster than a candy bar. Amylopectin A in wheat is like an express train for glucose. A slice of whole wheat bread is almost twice as high on the glycemic index of insulin-spiking foods as an entire Snickers bar. In his book Serve to Win, the number one ranked men's tennis player, Novak Djokovic, changed his diet to include the elimination of wheat. As he describes it, quote, between gluten and blood sugar spikes, wheat is the mixed doubles team from hell, end quote. Cardiologist Dr. William Davis, author of Wheat Belly, describes wheat consumption as, quote, from arthritis to acid reflux to schizophrenia, these can either be caused or made worse by wheat. It's about being set free from the peculiar appetite stimulating effects of the opiate-like compounds unique to wheat. We reject all foods made from high-yield semi-dwarf wheat, which is the worst crop ever created in a laboratory, end quote. The most common form of wheat in horse feed is wheat middlings. In dog food, it is called wheat mill run. The pet industry actually describes middlings as fine particles of wheat bran, wheat shorts, wheat germ, wheat flour, and some of the offal from the tail of the mill. Grain industry insiders refer to this cheap product as floor sweepings. A kernel of wheat contains 3 parts, germ, endosperm, and bran. All 3 components contain gluten, which means all 3 components contain gliadin, which binds to morphine receptors in the brain. But isn't bran good for horses and dogs and people? Bran contains 14% starch and 8% sugars, providing a total of 22% NSC. For easy keepers or metabolic horses and for dogs that are overweight, wheat bran would not be a good choice. Because of amylopectin A and the presence of gliadin, wheat bran may not be the best choice for humans either. As of January 15th, 2019, wheat middlings ranged from $70 a ton to $115 a ton based on the USDA market news. A ton is 2,000 pounds. If we take an average between high and low prices of wheat at $90 per ton, that translates into a cost of 0.045 cents per pound. In other words, 4.5 cents per pound. A pretty inexpensive ingredient. Any wonder why it is in horse feeds and dog foods? Horses, dogs, and people are becoming more food intolerant. Symptoms in horses and dogs can include excitable behavior, unexplained lumps and bumps on the skin, itchy or scurfy skin, loose or watery manure, loose or watery stool, lack of energy, recurrent bouts of low-grade colic, GI tract upset. Wheat is among the foods that horses are becoming food intolerant to. Others include soy, corn, alfalfa, timothy, molasses, oats, barley, and beet pulp. For dogs, this can include wheat and other grains and animal proteins like chicken, beef, turkey, or fish. The decision to go wheat-free for your horse or dogs or yourself is a very personal choice. At Biostar, we went wheat-free several years ago, taking wheat grains like spelt and kamut out of our formulas as well as wheat germ. We never used wheat middlings because they don't meet the whole food standards of Biostar. If you need an alternative to wheat bran for mashes, try oat bran instead. Remember to always add a high-calcium food like alfalfa pellets or cubes to balance the high phosphorus in oats and other grains.
Real horses and real dogs are healthier, perform better, and recover more quickly on real food. That's why Biostar empowers horse and canine owners with 100% whole food nutrition, supplements, and feeding programs. Biostar products are made at their own certified non-GMO facility in Gordonsville, Virginia, using real fruit ingredients that are raw, freeze-dried, or dehydrated, never cooked, and are free from artificial flavors, colors, soy, corn, wheat, and molasses. The Biostar product line includes a wide range of whole food, horse and dog supplements, treats, and unique artisan poultices that embrace the ancient and traditional uses of clay and plants. Visit biostarus.com today and learn about whole foods and canine and equine nutrition so you can make the best decisions about the care and health of your horses and dogs. That's biostarus.com. Whole food nutrition the way nature intended.
So now we're at Coffee Clatch, and it occurred to me that I am only an okay reader of the body language of my dogs. I actually read other people's dogs way better. Do you find that? It's like sometimes I know them so well that I can't read them as well as a strange dog whose actions I can read much more clearly.
I think that makes a ton of sense because you're kind of always looking at them. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I really count a lot on the look in their eye. I think I just intuitively read eyes sometimes better than I read bodies. I mean, I can read a lame body, or a sick body. But I think dogs are trying to communicate with us 100 times more than we recognize.
Oh, I would totally agree with that. I would totally agree. Well, I mean, like a perfect example is I have this new adorable puppy who if I sit back in a room and I watch him, he communicates very clearly when he needs to go outside, which is completely different than what the other dogs would do. He goes into the far off corner because he wants to be private about what he's doing, and he's like he'll like do this like thing that he thinks is very clear to me. Hey, Ma, I got to go outside. And if I'm not watching that, then he has an accident. If I'm watching that, I'm like, oh my goodness, like, let's go outside. So I totally agree. I like it. If you had nothing else going on in your life and you could sit and watch your animals, I think we would be all stunned at how much they talk to us.
Yes.
Seriously.
Jennifer?
I've gotten better at reading doggy language over the years, but I definitely struggle with the greyhounds. They're
Oh, that's a good point.
I don't think they're as expressive as some breeds. Yeah, they tend to be stoic. I know Glory has one face for everything. Need water, need food, need to go to the bathroom, my ears itch. It's the same face.
That's
like,
a
which
really
one
good
is
point.
it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, when she's around other dogs, I can read her body language pretty clearly because she's very expressive around other dogs about letting everybody know how she feels. But when she's interacting with her humans, she's not.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's very common with greyhounds.
Interesting.
Yeah, they seem to be introverted, for lack of a better term. I'm not sure what the word is, but I think stoic is the way a lot of people describe them.
I wonder if sighthounds are that way. I mean, whether that's same with.
I think a lot of them are. Yeah, I think a lot of them are that way. Now, I've not been around a ton of sighthounds, but the little bit I have, they're a little bit like racehorses in that, okay, it's time to chase what we chase, whether it's lure coursing or bunnies or whatever they're going to chase. Then they're all animated and all about it. But the rest of the time, they're like, yeah, talk to the hand.
Talk to the paw.
Talk to the paw.
Talk to
Just
the
don't
paw.
care. Whereas I think Tigger, you have herding dogs. Do you think herding dogs tend to be naturally expressive or not? Can you generalize?
I've had blue heelers. I've had corgis. I grew up with border collies. So I have had quite a variety of herding dogs. And I do think that on average, they really try to communicate with humans maybe more than like a terrier.
Yeah.
or maybe I've just gotten really good at reading them. But they use, what I find so interesting is the way they use their ears.
Yeah.
Similar to a horse, whether they're listening to what you're saying.
Really expressive ears, you're right.
Yeah, really expressive and subtle, like their ability to just, like a horse, just sort of move one ear to either hear you or they're
observing
into something that's
observing their surroundings without taking their eye off their quarry. Because it's I keep an eye on that sheep, but I need to be aware of what's going on over there. And they're using their ears to do it. Isn't that interesting? Like little radar.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then how they use their, not so much their paws, but the middle of their bodies, how they drape themselves when they're lying down.
Yeah, I think drape is a good word. They cover more surface area of the ground than their body really is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet there are times when they don't, when they're more in a crouch.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would really, sometimes I wish I could just crawl into the skin of one of my dogs and look out and have to communicate with a human being without my voice, because I know they're thinking and I know they're psychically communicating and they're communicating with their bodies. It must be very frustrating.
Yeah.
You know?
Or not. Maybe it's just like, my mom told me it would be this way.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Might be that.
She warned me. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking they're in the human world. It's not like a wolf.
Yeah.
Where everything is all telepathic communication among all the animals and plants, but here are the dogs and the cats and the horses dealing with the human world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it just makes you realize,
there's so much more to learn.
Yeah, and just how life gets in the way of just the things that we could, witness. I mean, obviously most of our listeners aren't going to be horse trainers or people that have a bunch of dogs or live the life that we do, but just, how you can just sit back and just, if you just let things be and you witness like what our animals are doing in front of us, it's just like truly amazing. And how little we know,
Yeah, how little we know. And maybe a good, New Year plan is that we spend more time observing them, and learning from them, which means that we have to get off the stress wagon or I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this. And
I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, right? And spend 30 minutes just being with them and allowing them to be with us with no expectation and learn from them.
Right. And how much we can learn.
Oh, it's huge.
It's huge.
So maybe our listeners would like to join us in this New Year's opportunity.
Revolution.
And let us know what you observe with your dogs and horses and how they're communicating with you.
Amen.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks to our sponsor, Biostar US. You can find them online at biostarus.com.
Get the Horse Radio Network phone app on iOS or Android by searching for Horse Radio Network in the App Store. It's free and easy to use.
For details about today's show, go to healthycrittersradio.com, where you can find links, photos, and more information about our guests.
As always, we love your feedback. Please follow us on Facebook under Healthy Critters Radio.
Be sure to visit all the great shows on Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
Love your dog.
Hug your horse.
Feed your chickens.
Clean your litter box.
Dance with your goat.
Slither with your snakes.
Howl at the moon.
Hang with your hamster.
Party with your parrot.
Waddle with your walrus.
Outwit your otter.
Cuddle your cows.
Rap with your raptor.
Go chipping with your chipmunks.
Forgive your fox.
While hedging your hog.
We also recommend that you rack with your raccoon.
Gyrate with your giraffe.
Meditate with a meerkat.
Uber with your orangutan.
Facebook with your flamingo.
Ponder with your panda.
Walk with your Wookie.
Yawn with your yak.
Twitter with your toucan.
Go raining with your reindeer.
Dropbox your dragon.